When the email came that Friday morning in April, Laura Jensen almost deleted it without reading. The subject line, "Notice of Employment Termination," looked like spam, another cruel trick from the endless stream of job scams she'd been dodging lately. But when she saw her company's name, Northwest Logistics, her chest tightened. She clicked it, her hands trembling, and there it was in black and white, asterisk due to restructuring, your position has been eliminated effective immediately. Final pay will be deposited within 7 business days, asterisk that was it. No thank you, no apology. Just a digital goodbye after 21 years. Laura sat frozen at her kitchen table, the hum of her old refrigerator filling the silence. The coffee she'd poured minutes earlier went cold. She thought of the medical bills waiting on the counter, the $1,200 rent due next week, and the credit card minimum she'd been barely managing to pay. Outside, Seattle's sky was its usual muted gray, the kind that made the world feel heavy. She whispered, "What am I going to do?" to no one, her voice cracking. By the time her daughter Ava got home from community college, Laura had replayed the moment of losing her job so many times that it felt unreal. Ava, 19, still wearing her scrubs from her nursing aid internship, dropped her bag on the couch. "You look pale, Mom. What's wrong?" Laura tried to smile but it faltered. "They let me go." Ava froze. "What? After all these years?" Laura nodded. "Corporate cuts," they said. No warning. The girl's face fell, and she hugged her mother tight, both of them silent for a long time. "We'll be okay," Ava whispered, though she didn't sound sure. Laura wished she could believe it. They'd already been struggling since Brian, Laura's husband of 23 years, had left 2 years earlier for a woman he'd met at a real estate seminar. He'd promised support, but his payments were late more often than not. He lived across town now in a new condo, posting photos of weekends in Palm Springs while Laura rationed groceries. That weekend, Laura sat at her dining table with a calculator, trying to make sense of her finances. Severance pay, none. Savings, $1,134. Checking, $218. Credit cards, $9,600 total debt. Car payment, $289 due Tuesday. She scribbled numbers on a notepad, tears blurring the ink. Every scenario ended the same way, short. She applied for unemployment but knew it would take weeks. She started scouring job sites, sending out resumes to any posting that even hinted at admin work. "You're overqualified," one recruiter said over the phone. Another ghosted her after an interview. "We went with someone with more recent experience," they emailed. She wanted to scream. She had experience, decades of it. But in a world obsessed with fresh energy, middle-aged women like her were invisible. Bills piled up, and desperation crept in like a slow leak. One night, scrolling through Facebook, she saw an ad that said *work from home. Earn $2,000 a week with Amazon partnership, the website looked professional, the testimonials convincing. She filled out the form, paid a $199 onboarding fee, and waited for her training kit. It never came. When she called the number, it was disconnected. Her stomach sank as reality hit, she'd been scammed. She cried so hard that night that Ava had to sit with her on the floor, holding her hand while she shook. "It's okay, Mom," Ava said softly. "It's just money." But it wasn't just money. It was her pride. Her trust. The last ounce of control she'd had. The weeks that followed blurred together. The landlord left a polite but firm voicemail about the rent. Laura sold her wedding ring for $480 at a pawn shop downtown. "It's good gold," the man behind the counter said flatly, as though he hadn't just appraised 23 years of love for less than a month's rent. She kept the receipt but didn't look at it again. When she told Brian, hoping he might help temporarily, he sighed. Laura, I'm covering my own mortgage now. I can't bail you out every time. Every time, she shot back. You bailed on us, Brian. The call ended with silence. In early June, a small break came, a temporary data entry contract at a hospital in Tacoma, paying $18 an hour. The commute was brutal, the work mind-numbing, but Laura clung to it. She packed lunch every day, counted change for gas, and tried to find moments of grace, the kind nurse who left her coffee on the desk, the janitor who joked that she always looked too serious. It wasn't much, but it was human. At night, she'd come home exhausted, her back aching, but when Ava showed her anatomy flashcards or made pasta, the apartment felt lighter. They laughed sometimes, the sound foreign but welcome. Then, one Friday afternoon, the contract ended abruptly. The manager called her into a cramped office. You've been great, Laura, but funding ran out. We'll call if we have more work. She nodded numbly, drove home in silence, and when she parked, she couldn't bring herself to get out of the car. She sat there as rain began to fall, listening to the rhythm on the windshield. She thought of all the years she'd given to companies, to a husband, to everyone but herself, and how easily she'd been discarded. For the first time, she let the anger come, fierce and cleansing. I'm still here, she whispered through tears. I'm still standing. That night, Ava came into her room holding 2 mugs of cocoa. Mom, remember Mrs. Ramirez from when I was little? She runs that thrift store on Pine Street now. She's looking for part-time help. Laura almost laughed. A thrift store. It's something, Ava said gently. She said to come by tomorrow. And so Laura did. The shop smelled of dust and old fabric, with sunlight filtering through lace curtains. Mrs. Ramirez, gray-haired, kind-eyed, hugged her like an old friend. You helped me with the PTA fundraiser years ago, she said. You were always organized. Laura smiled weakly. That was a long time ago. Organization doesn't expire, Mija, Mrs. Ramirez said. She offered her 15 hours a week at minimum wage, but it felt like salvation. And so began the next chapter of Laura Jensen's life, humbler, slower, but hers. She organized the racks, learned how to price donations, and chatted with lonely customers who came just to talk. Some days she'd find treasures in the chaos, a dress like the one she'd worn to her wedding, a set of dishes just like her mother's. Each piece felt like a memory, a life once loved. The work didn't pay much, but it gave her purpose. And for the first time in a long while, she went home tired but not defeated. Working at the thrift store didn't fix Laura's life, but it steadied her spirit. There was something strangely therapeutic about sorting through other people's cast-offs, things once loved, then abandoned. It reminded her of herself, in a way. Every chipped mug or worn sweater felt like proof that broken didn't mean worthless. Mrs. Ramirez, ever patient and warm, became an unexpected friend. On slow afternoons, they'd sit behind the counter drinking instant coffee, talking about everything from rent prices to lost love. You know, Mija, Mrs. Ramirez said one day, life is like this store. People throw things away when they think they're done. But sometimes, what's left just needs a little cleaning, a little care, and it shines again. Laura smiled. She didn't say it aloud, but she knew Mrs. Ramirez wasn't talking about furniture. The money from the job, $720 a month after taxes, wasn't enough to cover everything, but it kept the lights on. She took in extra hours when she could, sometimes staying late to help with inventory. Ava picked up weekend shifts at a cafe between classes, slipping $20 bills into her mother's purse when she thought she wouldn't notice. We're a team, Ava said when Laura confronted her about it. You've carried me for 19 years, Mom. Let me help for a bit. Laura wanted to refuse, but she couldn't deny how proud she was of her daughter's kindness. It gave her hope, even on the hardest days. Still, the financial pressure was relentless. The car broke down, transmission failure, $1,200 to repair. She didn't have it. She maxed out her last credit card just to get it running again, whispering apologies to her future self as she signed the receipt. A month later, the collection calls began. Each ring of the phone made her stomach twist. "Mrs. Jensen, we can offer a reduced settlement if you pay $600 today," a man said one morning. "I don't have $600, she replied. "Then, ma'am, it will be escalated." His tone was cold, mechanical. After hanging up, she burst into tears. It wasn't just the debt, it was the shame, the exhaustion of always falling behind. She'd once prided herself on responsibility. Now she felt like a walking failure. Around that time, she reconnected with an old coworker, Nina Grant, who reached out through Facebook after seeing one of Laura's posts about job hunting. "I'm so sorry about Nordwest," Nina wrote. "If you ever want to grab coffee, I'd love to catch up." They met at a small cafe near the thrift shop. Nina looked polished and confident, her blazer crisp, nails manicured. "You always kept things running back at the office," Nina said. "You deserved better." Laura smiled weakly. "Thanks. These days I'm just trying to keep rent paid." Nina leaned forward. "Listen, my cousin's been doing this thing, an online investment group. It's like a crypto trading club. She doubled her money in 3 weeks. I can get you in." Laura's gut twisted with doubt, but desperation clouded judgment. "How much do you have to invest?" she asked. "Minimum's $500, Nina said. "You'll get returns fast, I swear." Laura knew it sounded too good to be true. But she thought of Ava's tuition, of the credit cards, of wanting just one win. So she wired $500 through a sleek-looking platform, complete with charts and testimonials. For 2 weeks, she watched the numbers rise. $500 became $1,200, then $1,800. She was elated. "See?" Nina texted. "Told you." But when Laura tried to withdraw her profits, the system said her account was under review. 2 days later, the website vanished. Gone. The phone numbers disconnected. Nina's Facebook account deactivated. Laura sat in stunned silence, staring at the blank web page. She didn't even have the energy to cry this time. It was as if the world kept finding new ways to remind her how naive she'd become. When she told Mrs. Ramirez, the older woman took her hand gently. "You have a soft heart, Mija. That's not a flaw. But promise me, no more strangers with easy answers. The hard way might be slower, but it's real." Laura nodded, ashamed but comforted. That night, she made a vow to stop chasing miracles. She would build from what she had, even if it meant crawling. Autumn came, and with it, small mercies. A regular customer named Tom Keegan, a widower in his 50s who repaired bicycles, began stopping by every Saturday. He had kind eyes and a shy smile. "You're saving me a fortune," he joked once as she sold him a stack of old mystery novels. They began to talk, about music, books, the rain. He told her he used to play guitar in a local band before his wife got sick. After she passed, the songs just stopped coming, he said quietly. Laura didn't know what to say, but she understood that kind of silence, the one grief leaves behind. One afternoon, he asked, "Would you want to come by the cafe across the street sometime? Just coffee." She hesitated, then surprised herself by saying yes. That coffee became 2, then 3. Tom was patient, funny, unpretentious. He didn't flinch when she mentioned her debt or the scams. "You've been through hell," he said once. "But you're still standing. That's what matters." She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear that. They didn't rush anything, just quiet companionship, two people with their own scars, finding comfort in shared silence. Ava liked him, too, which mattered most. "He's good for you," she told her mom one night. "You smile more now." By winter, things started to look slightly less bleak. Mrs. Ramirez promoted her to assistant manager, bumping her pay to $17 an hour. She worked longer shifts and began catching up on her bills, one payment at a time. The car was paid off. The rent was current. Her credit score even crept upward. It wasn't a miracle, just slow, persistent effort, the kind she once thought was too small to matter. But it did. On Christmas Eve, Laura and Ava decorated a small tree they'd bought secondhand from the store. They hung mismatched ornaments, some cracked, some handmade, and laughed when the star tilted sideways. Tom stopped by with a pie and a small wrapped box. Inside was a bracelet made of recycled guitar strings. "Thought you'd appreciate something with a few scars," he said. She laughed and hugged him, tears in her eyes. It had been years since she'd felt loved without conditions. That night, when she went to bed, she didn't feel rich or secure or fixed. She just felt enough. By the following spring, the rhythm of Laura's days had settled into something steady, almost gentle. She still woke early out of habit, brewed coffee in the chipped blue mug she'd found at the thrift store, and listened to the rain tapping against the window. Seattle's gray sky no longer felt oppressive, it felt like a blanket. She'd learned that calm wasn't the absence of struggle but the decision to breathe through it. The thrift store had become more than a job, it was a refuge, a community stitched together by stories. Regulars came in just to chat, to donate pieces of their lives. Mrs. Ramirez trusted Laura completely now, sometimes leaving her in charge while she visited her grandkids. "Your family, Mija," she'd say, handing over the keys. And Laura believed her. After years of feeling disposable, she'd finally become needed again. Then, in May, the letter arrived, a thick white envelope from a collection agency in bold red print, notice of legal action. Her stomach turned as she tore it open. The credit card company she'd owed had sold her debt to collectors, who were now threatening to garnish wages if she didn't pay $4,800. Her hands shook so hard she almost dropped the paper. She'd been making minimum payments for months, doing her best to stay afloat. How could this happen now, when things were finally stable? She sat on the floor, heart pounding, memories of every past failure flooding back, the job loss, the scams, Brian's indifference. For a few minutes she couldn't move. Then she remembered Mrs. Ramirez's words, "The hard way might be slower, but it's real." She picked up the phone. It took courage she didn't know she had, but she called the collection office herself. "Please," she said, voice trembling, "I want to make this right. I can't pay it all, but I can do $200 a month." The man on the line paused, then said, "We'll note your hardship and accept that arrangement." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. After hanging up, Laura felt shaky but proud. She hadn't hidden. She hadn't run. For the first time, she'd faced the monster directly. Still, the stress crept into her sleep. She'd wake at 3 a.m., counting numbers in her head, wondering how many more years she'd spend clawing out of holes she never dug on purpose. One night, she walked quietly to the living room so she wouldn't wake Ava. The apartment was dark except for the glow of the streetlight through the curtains. She looked around, at the sagging couch, the second-hand shelves filled with thrift store books, and felt a surprising tenderness. This little space had seen every version of her, the broken one, the angry one, the survivor. She whispered to the room, "Thank you for keeping us." The next morning, while making coffee, her phone buzzed. It was Tom. "Morning, sunshine," he said in his gravelly voice. "Got plans Saturday?" She smiled despite herself. "Just work and bills. The usual." Then let's escape it for a day, he said. There's a fair down by the waterfront. You deserve a night off. She almost said no. She wasn't used to saying yes to joy. But she did. The fare was simple: music, food trucks, the smell of popcorn and rain, but for a few hours she forgot about debts and deadlines. Tom won her a stuffed bear at a ring toss booth. When he handed it to her, she laughed, the sound startlingly free. You know, he said, I think you laugh like someone who finally believes good things might last. She didn't answer, but she squeezed his hand. That summer, Ava finished her nursing aid program and was accepted into a full nursing degree at the University of Washington. They celebrated with cheap champagne and takeout Chinese. We did it, Mom, Ava said. You did it, Laura corrected. I just kept the lights on. No, Ava said firmly, you kept my hope on. And that night, as Laura lay in bed, she realized how far they'd come, not rich, not secure, but together and alive. Then, one ordinary Tuesday in August, tragedy struck again. Mrs. Ramirez collapsed in the back room of the store. A heart attack. Laura called 911, her hands steady even as tears blurred her vision. The paramedics worked quickly, but by evening, Mrs. Ramirez was gone. The shop felt hollow without her warmth. For days, Laura moved through the motions, unlocking the door, sorting donations, pretending everything was fine. At the small memorial service, surrounded by boxes of vintage clothes and old records, she broke down. She gave me back my dignity, she told the group softly. She believed in me when I didn't. Afterward, the store's owner, Mrs. Ramirez's son, Miguel, approached her. My mom talked about you all the time, he said. She wanted you to manage the place if anything happened. It's yours, if you want it. Laura was speechless. Miguel, I don't know if I can. You can, he said simply. And she did. She accepted, not out of ambition but gratitude. The raise wasn't huge, $21 an hour, but it meant she could finally breathe. She poured herself into the work, updating the layout, creating a little reading corner for customers, starting a community donation fund for women in need. It became more than a store, it was a lifeline for others like her. A few months later, one of the regular customers, a shy young mother named Kelsey, confided that she was being harassed by debt collectors and didn't know what to do. They make me feel like garbage, Kelsey said. Laura took her hand and said, You're not garbage. You're just someone finding her footing. She helped her write a repayment letter, the same kind she'd once written trembling, and when Kelsey hugged her afterward, crying, Laura realized something quietly profound: she'd become the person she used to pray would save her. By winter, her life was far from perfect, her old car still rattled, bills still came, but there was peace in the imperfection. On Christmas Eve, she and Tom hosted dinner at her apartment. He played his guitar for the first time in years, singing softly while Ava filmed on her phone, laughing. Laura sat on the couch, the thrift store lights twinkling behind him, and felt something she hadn't in a long time: a contentment. Not the fragile kind that depends on luck, but the deep, steady kind built from endurance. Later that night, after everyone left, she stood by the window watching snow fall over the quiet street. The world outside was still hard and unpredictable, but she wasn't afraid anymore. She'd learned to live inside the uncertainty and still find warmth. She whispered to the darkness, I made it through. The following spring, when the cherry blossoms began to scatter across the sidewalks like pink snow, Laura Jensen finally felt like she could exhale. A full year had passed since Mrs. Ramirez's death, and the thrift store, now renamed Ramirez and Hope at Laura's insistence, had become a small landmark in their Seattle neighborhood. The shelves were brighter, the windows always clean, the front chalkboard covered in handwritten notes that read things like asterisk, thank you for believing in second chances. Asterisk on most mornings, Laura arrived early, brewed a pot of coffee for the staff, and sat for a few quiet minutes before unlocking the doors. She liked the way the sunlight hit the dust in the air, how the smell of old paper and fabric made the place feel alive. It was the kind of peace she hadn't thought she'd ever find again after losing her job, her marriage, and nearly her sense of self. But she'd rebuilt, not with luck or miracles, but with small, deliberate acts of endurance. The scars were still there, the debt wasn't gone, her heart still flinched when she thought of Brian, but the pain no longer defined her. Sometimes Brian still called, mostly about Ava. He'd remarried the woman he'd left her for, though the shine had already faded. Once, in a rare moment of humility, he said, "You look happy, Laura." She smiled through the phone. "I am," she said simply, and meant it. There was no bitterness left, only distance, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had survived what he thought would destroy her. The old Laura would have cried or begged for understanding. The new one hung up and went back to organizing donations. Ava's nursing studies kept her busy, but she still visited every weekend. They'd cook pasta and laugh about the early years when they'd eaten cereal for dinner and prayed the power wouldn't get shut off. "You taught me how to fight," Ava said one night while folding laundry. "Even when you were scared." Laura smiled softly. "I was scared every day," she admitted. "But you were watching, and that kept me moving." Ava leaned her head on her shoulder, and Laura thought, "This is enough. This is everything." One rainy Tuesday, a woman about Laura's age came into the store, dripping from the downpour. "Sorry," she said breathlessly, "I just need to sit for a second." Laura fetched her a towel and a cup of coffee from the back. As they talked, the woman confessed she'd just lost her job. "I feel so stupid," she said, staring at the floor. "I trusted this online company. They said they'd pay me to process payments. Now my account's frozen, and my landlord's threatening eviction." Laura's chest tightened. It was like hearing her own story echoed back. "You're not stupid," she said firmly. "You were desperate, and people take advantage of that. But you're not done. I can help you call your bank, okay?" The woman nodded, tears streaming down her face. They spent the next hour on the phone together, sorting it out. When she left, she hugged Laura tightly and whispered, "You saved me." After she walked out, Laura stood there for a long moment, staring at the door, realizing that life had come full circle. She had become the hand reaching into someone else's darkness. The following months moved gently. Tom began teaching guitar lessons to kids at a community center, his music slowly returning. Sometimes he played at the shop on weekends, filling the air with soft acoustic melodies that made even the crankiest customers smile. He never pressured Laura about the future, no talk of moving in or marriage. They just existed side by side, quietly, gratefully. One evening, while closing up, he said, "You know what I admire most about you?" She laughed. "My stellar thrift pricing skills?" "No," he said, smiling. "That you never stopped trying, even when everything fell apart. Most people would have given up." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time since Brian, she felt safe enough to love someone without fear of losing herself in the process. When her tax refund came that year, just $612, she used it not for bills but to take Ava and Tom on a small weekend trip to the coast. They stayed in a cheap motel with a view of the ocean, and Laura walked barefoot along the water, the cold waves biting her toes. She thought about all the nights she'd cried over spreadsheets, the scams, the humiliation of pawn shops and eviction notices, and how every piece of pain had somehow brought her here, to this horizon, this freedom that didn't come from money but from surviving. Tom took her hand and said, "You did it." She laughed softly. "We did it. All of us." Back home, she started writing in a notebook every morning, small reflections, fragments of gratitude. "Today, I paid another bill. Today, a customer smiled. Today, I forgave myself for being fooled. the pages filled quickly, and one day Ava found it. "Mom," she said, "you should publish this. It's beautiful." Laura laughed it off at first, but when Ava showed one of the entries to her professor, who ran a community writing program, they invited Laura to share her story at a local event. She almost said no, afraid of revisiting it all, but she went. Standing at the small podium in a library basement, she told the room about losing her job, being scammed, feeling invisible at 48. She spoke about Mrs. Ramirez, about kindness, about how sometimes hope doesn't arrive like a miracle, it grows slowly from the ashes. When she finished, there was silence, then soft applause. A woman in the front row wiped tears from her eyes. Laura stepped down from the podium trembling but lighter, as though she'd finally released the last piece of shame she'd been carrying. That night, as she locked the shop and stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The street was slick with reflected light, storefronts glowing, puddles shimmering gold. She took a deep breath of the cold air. For years, she had thought survival meant scraping by, but now she understood it was more than that. It was finding beauty even when life didn't make sense. Later, lying in bed, she watched the shadows move across the ceiling and whispered a quiet prayer, not for luck or money, but for continued strength. "Whatever comes next," she said softly, "I'll handle it." And she did. The next morning, she woke to a world that still held bills, still held problems, but also held sunlight pouring through her window and the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of Ava humming in the kitchen. She smiled, pulled the blanket around her, and thought, I'm still here. I'm still standing, for the first time in years, that was more than enough. For more gripping tales like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update.